Welcome back to Partnerships Unraveled, the podcast where we dive deep into the mysteries and secrets of partnerships and the channel. My name is Michal, I'm head of marketing at Chanex, and I'll be your host for today. And today I've got the pleasure of speaking with Michal Jankech, Vice President of Enterprise, SMB, and MSP at ESET. It's great to see you. How have you been so far?
Very good. It's incredibly warm these days here in Bratislava, so it's good that I have an AC at home.
I hear you. You don't see it here, but I have two fans blowing cold air at me simultaneously because it's unrealistically warm in the Netherlands. I think it's 34 degrees right now. Luckily, I have my cooled water and my fan, so we'll make it work. I hope the excitement won't make me even warmer regarding this conversation. Hey, Michal, welcome to Partnerships Unraveled. I'd love to hear a little bit about who you are, your background, and your role at ESET.
Okay, so I'm already an inventory at the company, and with ESET for more than 16 years. For the first decade, I spent at product management. So I climbed the ladder from taking care of first the server products, then the business portfolio, then the management console, and eventually, after 10 years, I transitioned to a more executive advisory role. It was at that time called segment director, but eventually it's a segment VP. What does it mean? It's a metrics role. So normally ESET has line organizations, divisions, R&D, sales and marketing, customer care, etc. But there are originally three, now two VPs that are advising directly to the CEO about how to steer the ship. So like what to do next, how to adjust the proposition of the company, if there are any growth initiatives that we can bring that should accelerate our business. So, and that's pretty much my daily bread and butter over the course of the last 6 years.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. And I'd love to dive into the strategic advisory part a little bit later. But the first thing I'd like to ask is, spending your first 10 years in product management, that's an interesting foundation for someone who ends up leading channel and partner strategy and providing advice around this. I can imagine that gives you a pretty different lens than someone who came up, for example, through purely sales or commercial roles. So what was it about the partner and channel side that attracted you to jump into this role?
I would say it this way, like when I was a PM, I traveled a lot. I met a lot of clients, and I realized that within cybersecurity, many of those decisions are actually not customer-led, they are partner-led. So it's the channel partner that actually has a lot to say. If we talk MSPs, technically MSP is the customer. So MSP is the one procuring your solution. He builds the business. So I met a lot of MSPs. I like working with them. They are very technical people usually. Like the owner of an MSP is the engineer. So an engineer to an engineer, they always had a lot of technical product questions. So yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense to me. And I see that a lot across any type of SaaS or technological business, where you kind of figure out that so much of this is built around relationships in every kind of function within the organization, and that building strong relationships and understanding them can really bring you forward. What I'm curious about, you just mentioned that engineer to engineer narrative. I can understand that indeed builds trust from the start. Is there anything else that the product background that you had brought to how you lead commercially?
I was in a little bit of everything. So it's, when you are a PM, you are technically a mini CEO of a product, not of the whole company, but you need to understand the things around how the product is licensed, how the margin structure works. There is a lot of competitors out there. So you follow them, you monitor like what they do, what is their go-to market. So you do a little bit of everything. Of course, you understand the product itself the best. So you know what the functionalities are, what benefits are, but you touch all of those other areas. And I would say that gave me one of the advantages when I was applying to this role, that for me, the uptake was not as big as maybe for a purely sales-driven person to understand all the technical stuff. Because again, in cybersecurity, the product is a very significant part of it. Because again, even it's not a product, it's technically a service, because the product itself, you cannot just install it. It won't run if it's not properly updated. It's subscription technically. So it's very important part, but I always had my hands in all the other areas. So it was faster uptaker for me when I started, I would say. Still a lot of learning, but hopefully I manage it quite well.
I think that's such an important perspective to share, and I think that's also an important note to anybody now in commercial roles. Like, really do also take the time to deeply understand your product, because um, I think also when it comes to deep differentiation, and this is just my personal opinion, like you can find things within how a product is developed, designed, engineered, that you can then actually use in your conversations that can give you an edge around over a commercially minded person who might not understand kind of the deep benefits and the legacy of a certain solution. So yeah, even if you are a veteran commercial leader, dive into the products, understand what makes a solution tick and how it differentiates itself on a product level. I think it's great advice. I'd like to touch a little bit around about how you build your role from a strategic advisory perspective. So I speak to a lot of leaders inside large organizations who are navigating these matrix structures that you mentioned, and they constantly tell me that influence basically matters as much as authority. Your role obviously has a strong strategic advisor component, which I think is incredibly important to drive change at scale. But how do you actually drive transformation across an organization the size of ESET, like building alignment across teams throughout the business?
You actually said it. It's about relationships in the first place, because technically I cannot order anyone. I have just two direct reports, so that I can tell them what to do, but everybody else I need to get their buy-in. The people will only drive change if they are convinced that the change is for their benefit. And of course, ESET exists for almost 4 decades. We will have our 40th anniversary of the first technology next year, and therefore, you can imagine that the company needed to do a lot of changes recently to actually adopt, to transform. Initially, just the pure product business. Now it's a SaaS-driven company with a big services portfolio. And that actually introduced a lot of changes. And people are in general resistant to change. That's in our human spirit, but everything is working. We are still growing. Why we should do all of those changes? And I would say, it's not about what you say. It's also about how you say it and how confident you look saying it. It's. When I've spent a year in the US, and I always said that when you see the American military videos when they want to join the army, and they pretty much, I realized that what they need three things. They need a good training, they need a good weapon, but they need a strong belief for the case. And I would say it's the same in commercial business. To me, it's the product. And then they need the goal, but they need the belief that the weapon is right to achieve the goal. So the product fits the market where it goes. And so transferring the belief in form of energy, in a form of data-driven presentations, which clearly showcase the opportunity, that was for me the key to success. It's pretty much been a lot of presentations and convincing. And of course, when the results eventually come, even the ones that initially don't believe, they will start believe as soon as they see that it's actually working. So it's you need to get I would say, first 10% of another enthusiast that will help you cascade the change through the organization. So you need to pick the ones that you can get on board, and then they will pick another 10, and then it cascades down the whole organization.
Yeah, it's like a really positive network effect that you then create, to have evangelists within the organization. But I like listening to what you were saying. There's another interesting point that I see happen a lot myself as a marketing leader, and that is the alignment of the story is such an underutilized part of how we talk, and that's about how do you create one narrative that everybody shares and carries. And if you keep on hearing the same thing, you're going to start to believe it more as well, right? If everybody uses a different narrative, a different approach, it's going to be very difficult to say, what is ESET? What is our solution suite? What do we offer? If one person says X and the other person says Y, they could mean it genuinely, but you're not going to get that broad kind of carried message across the organization. And I think that's another really, really important point for organizations is engage with everyone across the matrix organization to find out what the core of your solution set is and how to tell that story in a singular way. I think you see that in most like really strong brands and really strong organizations. If you ask someone, what does your company do? They'll all say the same thing, right?
Yes, yeah, and it's a very challenging thing to do actually, to maintain the level of engagement, and especially when you do these changes, to get it updated. You know, I have a little bit of OCD myself, and for example, the company was changing the tagline, and it's funny that even a couple of years after, you still find someone using the old tagline. It's because, you know, internet is full of it, and especially now in the time of the AI. When we get candidates, it's sometimes funny that candidates try to impress you that they will do a branding content for their presentation, but the AI will simply use the old version of the branding. And then it's like, I see it, I'm very sorry, I see it.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge. It can be done, but it requires decent effort, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Decent effort and constant repetition, I think, is also a huge part of it. But speaking about the transition to the AI era, as opposed to the branding element of that, I wanted to talk a little bit about how ESET is using AI, because you just mentioned that ESET's going to be celebrating its 40-year anniversary next year, which is incredible. Congratulations. I mean, I think a lot of cybersecurity companies I speak to, they basically started yesterday, right? So it's a pretty big difference. And obviously, you've been using machine learning in detection for years and years, far before AI became the word in every company tagline. I'm curious, how do you make sure that that story lands with partners and customers in a way that reflects your history and your pedigree of what you've actually built over such a long period of time?
And that's a very difficult task, because we are a company founded by engineers, driven by engineers. Pretty much the original founders were all engineers. The CEO is an engineer. So they always looked at an engineering problem to fix. You know, like it's, let's say, in good old days, when it was just malware distributed on diskettes and dial-up internet, etc. It started to scale, and we needed to find a way how to scale faster than the threat landscape. And so the clever engineers started to look at some initial machine learning models, like, okay, what we can do? Can we do some feature extraction? Can we do a commonality analysis in the sample of code? And they started to slowly incorporate it into product. They did not tell anyone, because they thought that no one would actually care, because nobody will be able to understand. The product was working. It was at that time pretty much the best AV on the planet, because all the other competitors had huge virus signature updates, but ESET was able to do just few a day, and it worked. It was very light. And it was because somebody had a clever idea to leverage technology, which at that time did not even have a name. And then pretty much, I would say in last 20, but predominantly in last decade, cybersecurity started to be a very attractive investment area. So a lot of external funding started to came in. A lot of new companies started to penetrate the market, because the truth is that the market was existing for quite some time. There were, you know, the behemoths like Symantec or McAfee here pretty much dominating the market, but nobody was happy with their products. So, and if there is a big market where clients are unhappy, that means there is a potential for disruption. So a lot of new companies came in, and they started to distinguish themselves by claiming they are next generation. And then they started to leverage all of those acronyms, you know, like it's the AI, it's whatever. And it pretty much was still the old tech that we've been using for quite some time, but they invested a lot of external funding to actually make this message stand. And I remember having a lot of discussions with clients that, and Michal, are you a next gen AV? I said, we technically have all the functionalities that next gen AV does. So yes, we are a next gen AV, but it's not written anywhere on your web page. And if you don't say you are a next gen AV, technically you are not. So, and then we realized, like, it's, you know, it's not about what's under the surface, but it's what the eye can see and ear can hear. So we needed to actually adopt this modern language. And especially now in the last couple of years with the total explosion of AI, you know, it won't be a presentation this year that would not include AI word at least twice, one as an opportunity and one as a threat. Yeah. Especially in cybersecurity. So we are now leveraging it a lot, but we don't want to overshoot it. So, you know, like many vendors, they included .ai in their name or their web page, or everything is named AI. Like we still keep the company branding, the product branding. We have a lot of AI related features that we will be rolling out. So we are investing a lot. We see a big opportunity in both leveraging AI for protecting our customers, but also protecting the AI because everybody's using it, either intentionally or unintentionally, and it creates security risk. So there is a certain movement within the company around the AI communication. We just had our ESET World Conference a couple of weeks ago in Berlin. A lot of AI talks, a big investment for a company of our size that we want to build our own foundational models for cybersecurity analysis. Because, it's you said the magic word. It's trust. And that's the very important thing in cybersecurity. We cannot risk it. So we want to keep it safe because AI can do a lot of good, but also a lot of harm if it's not used the right way. And sharing all the secrets with models controlled by third parties is a big supply chain risk for a company of our likelihood.
Well, especially if those models can suddenly be turned off without any notice. So,
yes.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think there's almost an interesting paradox there that humility doesn't translate well into branding. And even if you're incredibly good at something and you've been applying machine learning models for years, that if you don't yell loud enough, that will kind of fall by the wayside. And I've used this example before, but it reminds me so much of growing up in the SaaS era, right? Where at one moment, I think around 2013, 2014, everybody started saying that they were SaaS, but they actually just had like a server running in a basement somewhere with a Wi-Fi connection. But you could, and I felt almost bad saying like, oh yeah, but you need to join that wave. You need to move forward, and your product can be fantastic, but you still need to use that language. And I think that's a tricky balance sometimes for organizations to bring heritage.
If you want to be honest to your inner yourself or be successful on the market, sometimes it's like an agreement with the devil. It's I remember again once, especially in the United States, like States is a different beast, the way how they talk. And I remember meeting a partner. It was a big MSP partner that we unfortunately lost to a competitor, one of those next gens. And we had a meeting with them. They were at the time still using us. And he said, perception is everything. If you don't say you are the greatest, nobody will think you are. You need to be confident. You need to actually make the claim. Of course, you need to fulfill the claim. But if you fulfill the claim and not make the claim, nobody will think of you because they will not even dare to try. Like a lot of startups, they come to big trade shows like RSA. They invest a huge amount of money into a booth. They will be there just once because next year their funding will run out and they will disappear. But their belief is when you showcase you are strong and powerful, the people will believe that the product is equally good because otherwise you won't have the funding to actually go to the trade show. So it's and it was completely opposite with us. Like we have almost 800 million ARR, almost 100 million profit. And we've been going to those trade shows with like a tiny booth at the edge of the floor. And people were like asking, and what are you guys? Like, are you some kind of a startup? What's your funding? And we were like, so, it's perception is very, very, very important.
Yeah, I totally understand. There is one benefit, though, for a company like ESET that actually does have that heritage and does have these skills to actually do what they say they can do, that the perception does actually match the reality. So that's a good thing.
It's the longevity of business, it's and that's how the trust is earned. Because there is this very common saying in the IT world, like don't fix if it's not broken. And if you are able to bring in a product that works and it's actually fulfills its promise, the stickiness is very high. And every company loves ARR these days. And it's if the product works and client is happy with it, that's pretty much the best testimony of a company that you can get.
Yeah, 100%. I think that a word has come up multiple times now in this conversation, and that's trust. I want to take a little bit of a different angle. I want to talk about the data sovereignty. I'm curious, from your perspective, how much that conversation has changed in Europe. Because to me, it feels like it's moved almost from like a compliance checkbox to an actual buying criteria for a lot of customers. And how real is that as a channel differentiator right now? Does it change how partners position ESET and how customers ultimately decide?
Yes, especially in Europe, like it stands substantially. So like, and it's again, it's advantage that was a disadvantage that became advantage again. Because historically, we had a large customer base that was running on-prem software. Like they installed our management console in their own data center or a physical server in the basement, as you said. Everybody wanted SaaS. So when you were doing SaaS, you were likely partnering with vendors like Azure, AWS, etc. Which we still, it works for majority. Now the challenge is Microsoft or AWS sovereign? And like they claim they are building data centers in almost every country, but under certain legislation, it's still American operated entity, so there can be an influence. So, but if you are able to run in a agnostic data center, it gives you credibility. But it's not just about when your SaaS is running. It's also how the data that you processed, where it's located, where it's processed, who can access it, how your services are delivered. So especially this part, like it's customers kind of understand that, okay, most of their workloads are inevitably running in Azure or AWS, because if you use pretty much all the big tech, Salesforce, Workday, all of those applications, they are there. So that's kind of, okay, it's necessary evil. They expect that nobody will dare to turn off Azure, because if they do, they will have much serious problems than just this, let's say this way. But especially the data access criteria, that started to be a very relevant discussions. And that's our advantage being European, because pretty much all of our data processing happens here in Europe, like all the malware analysis centers, all the AI models, all the locations where the actual replication of samples happen, and also the way how our MDR is delivered. It's within SOCs located in European countries. For US, yes, we have a SOC in the US. It won't be fair to claim otherwise, but those are the people only accessing the data of American clients. But for Europe, it's pretty much all done here. So it's and that's a very big talking point, especially now, because as you said, it became listed as a criterion. Interestingly, I would say that the term sovereignty is a little bit overused sometimes, that people just say, is your solution sovereign? But they don't necessarily know how to define it. So the conversation is usually two-way, like you ask them the right set of questions and then you narrow it down. But usually you come to a conclusion. But I do agree, it's changed a lot. And for us as European owned and 100% European originated vendor, it brings a big advantage.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. And I think it's also something that, it's buzzing, right? It's buzzing on the news. It's buzzing within companies I speak to, and being able to offer that basically from the start seems like a really important differentiator. And it's always interesting to see how things like that, they don't become an issue until they become an issue, if you know what I mean.
The AI sovereignty is also a relevant part. Like, okay, where is the model running? Who has access to the model? Is it a third-party model that you just leverage, or is it your own? We see also a big opportunities in this area. Like really have our own models, because the amount of data cybersecurity company is able to analyze is significant. AI can do a lot of good, but also you need to be careful what AI it is, how controlled, how governed it is, because otherwise it creates a big supply chain risk, which we cannot risk to not lose the trust. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally understand. This triggered a thought in my mind, just on a more product level perspective, which I'm sure you love to talk about. And that's it. If you look at the costs and benefits of internal AI or home built AI versus existing AI models, I wonder if there's conversations going on now with potential customers about, obviously the value of using mainstream AI models is that they're massive and they have huge amounts of data and they're proven, so to speak. But then on the other side, obviously having a home built AI means you have far more control on the guardrails, you have far more control on security, where data goes. Is that a discussion you're having as well, like the benefits and challenges of internal versus external?
But it's even internally, like it's there is a whole AI unit that takes care of all of this, and it's about what you do with what AI. Like it's if it's generic thing that that does not process any customer sensitive data. It's more like, anything from product design, writing some educational content, whatever. You can easily leverage all the publicly available models. But when you are talking about low level data processing, threat incident response, or the agentic SOC, as is the term that we want to keep in house, because that's it's pretty much all the low-level events that are happening in the organization, and which you are processing within your XDR platform. And if you want to leverage AI, it needs to be AI which is as trustworthy as your own employees from this point of view. And we keep pride in having a long-term employees that we know, it's there are a lot of those stories about companies remotely hiring North Koreans into their organizations, because of them faking their identity, etc. No, we don't do that. We actually still invite people physically to the interview whenever we can. And it's the same with AI. We want to know who the AI is, how the AI works. So with our own AI, we have a long-lasting expertise in researching and building. So that's our advantage, I would say.
Yeah, no, that makes
it's
a
big
sense.
Discussion, like when to use also, tokens, credits, the cost. Managing the cost of AI is also a big topic. So when you run it internally, you just need to make the upfront investment into a very powerful hardware and training the model, but then you have it under control. When it's a subscription based, it's unpredictable. Those companies will eventually need to start making money. As of now, they are burning them like crazy because they need to. But eventually, somebody will start asking, okay, where is your rule of 40? Like you are no longer growing at 1,000% a year. So how's your profit margin looking? So they will need to start increasing prices, setting fair usage policies, and that can very easily break business models of so many companies that are leveraging on this. So, you want to be on the safe side if it's a mainstream component of your business.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you see the same thing in certain consumer tech companies as well, that they indeed, they're priced a certain way because they have a bunch of venture capital money and they can burn through cash. But at one moment, indeed, that profit margin becomes more important. And then they have to increase prices to a point where consumers are like, wait, well, that's not worth it.
Yes.
But the implications, obviously, for B2B are far more impactful, where changing that commercial model could mean that you obliterate your own profit margins as well, right? So yeah, I think it's a really smart move. I agree that the complexity obviously up front is far higher, because it almost seems like really easy to just implement existing AI models, to use that power and to offset that to someone else, right? It's almost just a service. But yeah, I think in the long run, this will make a lot of difference, especially seeing the complexities, geopolitical complexities, tech complexities, cost complexities arising. I have one more question for you, which you mentioned that your MSPs are almost like your internal customers as well, and I see that a lot, right? That within a partner ecosystem, they're your customer, but they're your channel at the same time. And it really creates a different dynamic than a pure reseller relationship. So I'm curious, how do you design a partner program that supports both those realities? So supporting them as a customer, but then also enabling them as a delivery vehicle, especially in this kind of complex transitional phase that we're all in. Easy question.
Yeah, it's like you said, the question is like, how do you design that partner program? I would say this way: you keep changing it constantly, how the reality is evolving. Like it's a transactional notion, the standard margin profiles, etc. Versus in MSP, it's more like volume-based commitments. And eventually you want to merge them because you realize that pretty much, again, that's how I see it. I might be wrong, but more and more I'm convinced it's true that there are hybrids. Most of them are hybrids from the point of view that they have an MSP part of a business. So they have clients which they deliver as a service, and to some they just resell and opportunistically offer one-time services for implementation, but they just don't do it on a managed contract level. So you need to have both technical and commercial conditions that are enabling both and not creating too much burden from the operational standpoint. So, there is always a discussion like, okay, partner portals, marketplaces, how easy it is to do the transaction. And you have a different partner profiles. You have the ones that you service completely. So there is just a person that does it for you because we love you. You are too big for us, so we give you this extra service. There is long tail, which does it on their own through a intuitive marketplace, very simple with predictable pricing. So, and it's changing constantly, like their preferences are changing, and also they are totally inconsistent among geographies, like it's for example, again, in the US they love to talk, they love to call. In Europe, no, I just want to do it, just give me an intuitive UI. Now AI comes to play, so it's people starts to like to chat, but not with a human, but with a chatbot, which does them all of the magic. So I would say this way, how do you design? You listen to the ones you work with carefully. You balance. You never can satisfy everyone, but it's a constant game of chess to actually to be one step ahead compared to the others. But you need to be flexible. Yet the foundational principles of the partner relationship should stay, because it's that they for partners, and especially for MSPs. I'm like, what I see, MSPs are much more loyal, because usually to be a true MSP and a good MSP, you need to buy in on the technology, because you ideally become good when you standardize. So you have one cybersecurity for endpoint, you have one network, and you become an expert on it. And you make sure that all of the tech pieces that you actually leverage works well together. So you get a complete buy-in. So you need to make sure that the technology is rock solid and works and does not change and does not break up, because that's the number one. Like if you break it up, your MSPs will lose trust in you. Then the second part is predictable margins, it's and predictable roadmaps. They don't buy for your today's self. They ask you, okay, where are you heading? Where you will be in a couple of years? Because again, it's a big investment for them to adopt your technology. And most of them, they look forward. So they might have a vision where they want to become, how big they will be. Are they going to scale? Do they want to adopt more services? So you need to show them a vision, like where are you moving? Because, if your visions are aligned, it's a successful relationship in the long term. And last but not least, of course, the commercials. You need to have some track record of your commercials being reasonably good. Of course, there might be some changes from time to time, but you always need to do them in a way that you keep the balance, it's even we were forced to do some changes with regards to the pricing structures, ESET was a company, even the external analyst told us that you have not touched your prices for decades. So when you actually do it, then everybody says, but then when you actually explain why and all the changes, they understand. If you, of course, don't double them, but we never did that. But, it needs to be predictable. So you know what to expect in the long term. Product-wise, commercial-wise, relationship-wise, you need to deliver good support. And those are all the bits and pieces that establish a successful partner program. But as I said, it's never finished. It needs to keep evolving.
So the four things I can take away from what you just mentioned, I think these are all great points. Listen, continuously evolve, communicate a strong vision, and have strong commercials.
Yes.
Did I summarize that correctly?
Very good, very good. It's, fair licensing pricing model, fair amount of flexibility. They need to feel that it's not, like MSP business is a business which can be very volatile. Like a client goes out of business, they stop paying. So you need to be sharing the risk with them. So contractual commitments, don't force them, for example. Give them the flexibility. When the client stop paying, you can stop paying. We understand it. Don't penalize. Give them easy API, because they love to automate, so they can plug in. The best MSPs I've met, they barely even used the tech we gave them. They just integrated their own tech to our tech via APIs, and they had it nicely automated, because that was their added value. Listen to them, give them what they need, what they want, not everything, but you need to have the sense, like who's talking real stuff, who's talking just some fancy dreams that they might not even want. But the more you listen, the more you engage, the more partners you spend your time with, the better you become at filtering this. It's about relationship in the end. I have to say that that's the part of my job that I love the most. is actually to meeting the practitioners, to meeting the people that actually do the stuff, because it's you learn a lot. And if you can transfer those learnings into your day-to-day operations, and then you eventually see the outcomes of it, and you get that, you did this change and it was a good one. And you then come a couple of years back when you had a discussion very intensive that we should do this change, and you're like, no. And now you see that it's actually working. That gives you motivation and energy to actually continue forward. So it's, that's...
Yeah, no, I love it so much. And I think I feel that myself, having these conversations with people like you. It's like having these conversations gives insights that you didn't expect, or they can support assumptions that you were already making. So indeed, building those relationships, having those conversations is so critical. Honestly, I feel like I could talk to you about this for hours, but let's not do that. I want to be respectful of your time as well. You've mentioned some really interesting points in this conversation, but I wanted to ask, to wrap this up, do you have any final insights, tips, or tricks that you'd like to share with the audience?
First of all, don't be oblivious of what's happening around. So it's you need to look outside. You need to carefully see the network. I'm always saying that I'm too old to be on TikTok. I'm too young to be on I don't know what, but I use LinkedIn a lot, and I follow a lot of competitors. I follow a lot of meaningful people, and that's usually my bedtime routine. I checked in for LinkedIn what's happening, because you need to know. So that's the first one. Don't be oblivious to what's happening around, because many companies becomes very self-centric. They just care about themselves. They live in their little universe, but the ecosystem is changing so quickly that you can easily miss the trend. So that will be number one. Then number two, I said it, listen. Especially in a business which is channel driven, the channel partner is the best source of feedback for you. It's actually the source of feedback that you can relatively easily access, because you already have the established relationship. So engage with them, keep them engaged, show up. That's a very important part. It's like with normal relationships. If you don't keep them alive by reaching out, and not just reaching out, hey, how are you? But also giving them meaningful insights and keeping them engaged, they are going to fade out. So that would be a second one. Third one, but that's more a personal one, work-life balance. It is I would say, tremendous industry, a lot of energy in it. But, there are people that feed you energy. There are people that drains your energy. Find a balance. You see a lot of Lego. For me, it's very good to find my inner balance. After a difficult day, it's the best thing you can do. You can sit quietly, build something, you immediately see the result. So that would be number three. I think that I will just keep the three. That's enough.
It's a nice lists of three always work online, right? No, I really appreciate that. I think these are all words to live by. I want to thank you incredibly for sharing your thoughts and taking the time to speak with me. And for you, dear listeners, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you, Michal.
Thank you.